Hey folks, coming to you on this very cold Monday at the end of October. Happy Halloween, by the way. Today I'm watching Bohemian Rhapsody, the biopic of Queen and Freddie Mercury. I've often wondered how long Hollywood would leave it before they would actually tell the band and Freddie Mercury's story. And with Rami Malek attached as the lead role as Freddie, and from what I've seen from clips, trailers and stills of him as Freddie, and then comparing footage and photos to him afterwards, there's an eerie resemblance. And it's gonna be like, I apologize for the noise in the background. It's also gonna be like the first movie I've seen Joseph Mazzello in since his cameo in The Lost World Jurassic Park, which this year celebrated its 21st anniversary. Still a better movie than Jurassic Park 3. I'm going to shut up about that now. Can Hollywood, and more specifically, can 20th Century Fox tell a very accurate but entertaining story about the life of Freddie and Queen? In the next couple of hours, you will know my exact opinion of Bohemian Rhapsody, which on a personal note, still one of the greatest rock songs of all time. I don't know anybody who doesn't know that song. In 2 hours, you'll know of whether my opinion is fact, is fantasy, or reality. Till then, see ya. Well, I'm sorry spoiler review's taken a bit of a while to come to fruition, and as you can see, slight wardrobe change. But the cold weather really did a number on my throat Monday night last week, so it's taken a week and a half just to get to this spoiler review, but with good reason. They say timing happens for a reason, and I thought it was more prudent to wait until my voice had cleared up enough, because I was still suffering badly with a cold, yet again. So, the spoiler-free review was already filmed, that was done in the can. The spoiler review's taken a while to get here, because I could have done the spoiler review the same night as having filmed the spoiler-free review, but it would have been multiple outtakes with me trying to steady my voice, having to cut pieces out where I would have been coughing to the point where it just would have been unwatchable. So I thank you for your patience, for not only having to wait this long for the spoiler review, but, you know, just so I could get my voice cleared up. So to my subscribers watching, thank you immensely for being so patient. And as before, if you've clicked onto this thinking that this is the spoiler-free, as ever, I'll give you 5 seconds to stop the video and go to the spoiler-free link in the description, so that if you haven't seen the movie and you don't want it spoiled, this is your chance to leave. Okay, we're good. I'm gonna get some of the criticisms this movie has received with regards to writing, because there are a few inaccuracies that the movie has done. And I've actually been watching quite a few Queen documentaries since watching this, including BBC 4's very, very well made presentation of Days of Our Lives, which I thought, you know, is a very apropos named title for a documentary about arguably one of the greatest rock bands of all time, if not the greatest of all time. And I understand now and completely sort of sync up where it's like, no, that didn't happen, that didn't happen, that didn't happen, that certainly didn't happen. I'll address some of them. It's implied in the movie that Freddie, Brian and Roger all met up on an evening where Smiles' original lead singer quit, and Freddie was offering his services to them then, but Freddie, Roger, and Brian had actually known each other for some time before that piece. I appreciate from a writing perspective, I get it why they did it. You know, it's a nice, I don't want to say fairy tale moment, but it's a nice way of Freddie getting his foot in the door. The other ones that don't really sync up is the idea that Freddie had walked away and kind of done a Paul McCartney by leaving the Beatles before John Lennon, you know, inevitably breaking the band up. Here's the thing, in real life, they had wanted to pursue solo projects for a while, so again, from the perspective of, you know, creating tension and creating drama, I totally get why they did it, but from a historical accuracy point of view, it gets denoted a few points. In the same context that Freddie wasn't diagnosed with AIDS until 1987, and in the movie, he's diagnosed with it, you know, in just a short run-up to Queen's inclusion with the Live Aid performance. It is actually true that he did ask the band and those around him that knew, we're going to keep this to ourselves because I don't want to be their poster child for the disease, which is actually true because Freddie didn't tell the world that he had AIDS until the day before he died. Because Freddie, and even Brian May and Roger Taylor had said quite specifically he just wanted to be remembered as a really fine musician and an equally decent human being. And, you know, Rami in particular, he wouldn't have been my first choice. That's not to say that, you know, I mean, by the end of the movie, I was like, yeah, I'm convinced he was Freddie Mercury. Because originally, Sacha Baron Cohen of Ali G fame, Borat, and Bruno, he was originally tagged on to play the legendary frontman for Queen. But he had his own very specific vision, and apparently he wanted to push the movie to a much more X-rated rating. And I think the producers, including Brian May and Roger Taylor, because they got heavily involved with the production and the writing of this movie because they wanted Freddie's legacy and his humanity kept intact, because it's not just their fellow band member, it's their lifelong friend, and they want him done justice, and I completely understand that. And also, and this is where I'm kind of defeating my own argument, with there being historical inaccuracies with regards to the writing of the story. They could have turned around and said, no, this didn't happen this way, no, we're not happy with this. So, if they were happy with this, yes, it does defeat my nitpicks a little bit with regards to the historical inaccuracies, but someone else would have pointed this out long before I did, so, and they've probably already pointed it out anyhow. But with regards to writing, the movie does more or less a decent job of showing Queen's rise from their humble beginnings to megastardom and ending off with the iconic Live Aid performance from 1985. And I think in terms of characterization, I think they did a really decent job of you know, of really fleshing these characters out. Well, fleshing out the real life figures that they were portrayed as. And like I say, aside from some historical inaccurate nitpicks, writing for the most part is very entertaining and does the job that it's needed to. So writing more than just gets a pass. Again, historically inaccurate in places, but from an entertainment perspective, job done. with regards to casting, I could not have picked anyone better. The ones that the ones that really stand out the most, Joseph Mazzello. I haven't seen this guy in anything or heard of anything of him in anything notable since Star Kid in the mid to late 90s, although I think they only gave him that main event feature in that movie purely based on, you know, his performance and his success of the first Jurassic Park movie, which, you know, even to this day he's still extremely proud of that movie, and so he should be. And he is just an absolute spitting image for former Queen guitarist John Deacon, who retired in the mid to late 90s because I think Freddie's death had affected him in such a way that you just like, well, you can't go on without Freddie. And, you know, I respect that decision, and so do quite a few other people. Gwynlyn Lee, I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. When you see him in the wig as Brian May, it's like, you can use your own imagination of what I've just said there, but the resemblance to Brian May as a young man is so uncanny. The fact that even Brian May sort of stopped, goes, what was I doing there? I was like, oh, of course, it's not me. It is, but it isn't. Even down to, you know, Lee's vocal mannerisms, because Brian May is a very soft-spoken individual. He's very polite, and even when in the movie, even when May is voicing his disapproval with some of the things that Freddy's doing with what Freddy's doing, he's doing it in a way that's, you know, is very civil, is very soft-spoken. You know, he's telling. It's like he's being angry, but he's doing it in such a way where he doesn't have to raise his voice, you know, and a lot of it is also down to the eye language, just being able to get the point across without raising your voice. And, you know, I think it was Robert De Niro who said, "Powerful men do not shout." I think this is true in this case. Ben Hardy as Roger Taylor. I mean, I've looked at pictures, and especially the music video for Bohemian Rhapsody. Hardy is an absolute ringer for Roger. And, you know, and then of course we come to Rami Malek of Mr. Robot fame, and one of the mechanics from the 2014 adaptation of Need for Speed. That needs a sequel. It needs to happen. Rami as Freddy. Again, when I heard about him playing Freddy, I've never think, oh, the guy from Need for Speed. It's like, okay, that could be different. And then I kind of remind myself of looking back at archive footage and music videos and interviews of Freddy. And then I'm seeing Rami giving the portrayal and his take on the big screen. It's just like, especially with the mustache, I was like, that's good. Even down to like the, you know, the vocal, you know, like with Gwynlyn, you know, with his vocal mannerisms as Brian May, Rami's as Freddy's, it's like he got it down to a fine art. It's like, oh, darling, you know, this is what we're here to do, darling. And I'm like, I like that. I think even Rami has said in interviews afterwards, he kind of got so used to doing it. And even, you know, the way, the energy that he would have on performances, where it was the performance of We Will Rock You in Madison Square Garden, or to doing the Live Aid performance at Wembley Stadium. Just the sheer energy and movement, because Freddy never choreographed anything. From what I've seen from performances, music videos, you know, everything was spontaneous with him. You know, he did things on a whim. You know, he felt it. So instead of a choreographer, Rami got a movement choreographer coach, whereby, you know, just looking at these sort of movements that Freddy would do physically and his vocal mannerisms, it's like, you know, try to get the essence of what Freddy was doing. He was definitely a free spirit from what I've seen, you know, did everything on his own terms and was unapologetic about it, and I think that's awesome. So, and the thing that the two things that make me smile quite a little bit is seeing Mike Myers' inclusion as the EMI executive. And those that know, Mike Myers is particularly has a particular famous moment from 1992 for doing the first Wayne's World with the headbanging scene in the pacer to Bohemian Rhapsody, and I have to confess, I did that a couple of times with a group of buddies of mine. So many years later, I'm still feeling the sting of it. I mean, the mistakes of youth, right? You know, it's cool whilst you're doing that then, but then later you sort of think, oh, you schmuck. It's like, why would you do that? But to see his inclusion with that was great, and this is seen in the trailer, but it's also just so fun to see this in the movie. It's the absolute zinger that Freddy delivers to the executive, where the executive's complaining that this goes on for 6 minutes, it goes on forever. Oh, I picture your wife if you think 6 minutes is forever. I'm like, ooh, it's like, that's good. So acting, you know, for the cast, the acting, I could not fault anything whatsoever. Acting, you couldn't get any better. Well, for score, you know the majority of this was going to be Queen's extensive back catalogue, whether it was Bohemian Rhapsody, which is arguably their most famous song of all, to another one, Bites the Dust, which, little interesting thing, Michael Jackson actually told Freddie to go with it, which I'm like, oh, it's like, I did not know that. That's a duet I would have loved to have seen happen whilst the two of them were alive. The King of Rock and the King of Pop. And just imagine what could have been created from that. Now, there are bound to be sound-alike artists that will be like, there'd be a sound-alike for Freddie Mercury, and there'd be a sound-alike for Michael Jackson. They probably would act out the fantasy of, let's go. Let's just see how this would do. You never know, could happen. But yeah, and you hear things like "We Will Rock You," which is, you know, is another iconic song. To "We Are the Champions." I mean, I don't know anybody that hasn't heard that. I thought it was very apropos and appropriate when they were going through the credits that one of the last tracks that Freddie had recorded on the 91 Innuendo album, "The Show Must Go On," which I think was a symbolic way of saying, like, even though I'm gone, you guys need to keep on going. The show must go on. And he's absolutely right. Because you could stop and just not continue on doing what you were going to do, but he, from what I've seen from interviews from May and Taylor, he was always a firm believer of, like, no, this is how I would have wanted it to end, this is how I would have wanted it continued, just go do it. So, you know, score, soundtrack, you know, it's Queen's, you know, legendary and iconic back catalogue. I mean, what more can you say? And funny thing, this is just on the sort of a personal thing. I've watched the music video for These Are the Days of Our Lives, which was the last time ever that Freddy was on camera. And I love the way that music video was shot, with this very sort of, when I say noir black and white, with the way it's a little bit hazy, with the way the light is bouncing off of objects and the people in the music video. And Freddy has what I like to call these quirky, eccentric facial expressions. You know, even though the man is being weakened by the virus at that point, he's still able to express himself. He still has that love and energy for life and just being entertaining. And, you know, I find that incredibly admirable and, you know, very inspiring. You know, he just basically, you know, he was going to enjoy life come what may. That would have been nice if that song could have been included on the soundtrack, but there's only going to be so many spaces for that. The only reason I'm touching upon visual effects for this is because, as we all know, the original Wembley Stadium was torn down in 2000 because, you know, it made way for the current one that we have without the Twin Towers. It would have been on, I think it's the north side of the original Wembley Stadium. Correct me in the comment section below if I'm wrong, and chances are I am. But just to be able to get it as near pinpoint accurate to the original Wembley Stadium that stood from 1923 all the way up to 2000, you know, from lighting, shading, to the actual shape of the stadium roof, I don't think that the makers of this movie I don't think they could have done a better job. It was almost like being there. And yeah, that's pretty much it for visual effects. Well, as for final verdict, taking into consideration what I've just said, you know, that there are historical inaccuracies with the movie, but at the same time, you know, the fact that Queen themselves were okay with the story, that's like, well, they must have done something right. I get with ending the movie with the Live Aid performance and telling the band before the performance that he is suffering with the virus, it gives a much more emotional and sort of, I don't want to say bittersweet payoff to the end, but it does elevate the emotional stance with the movie, because there's something to play for now. And again, I can't fault the casting of this movie. I know the movie had been in developmental hell for 10 years, but they say that timing happens for a reason, and I think with regards to the cast that they got for this movie, I think they waited for the right time to get the right actors for the right roles, and I could not have cast anyone better. And of course, you know, the next biopic or fantasy biopic that's going to happen next is one that's loosely based on Elton John's life with Rocket Man, which that'll be intriguing in its own right. And then I was reading that on Wikipedia that Elton is apparently heavily involved with the writing, and I'm like, oh dear. I was like, this is a man whose eccentricities outweigh my own. Let that sink in a moment. But the one biopic, and this is something I talked about at length on Sunday Night Live recently, the one biopic that I would not only like to see done just to see how it could be handled, the one biopic I want to see happen, and there's a lot of bias with this as well because I'm a huge fan of this artist, George Michael. Because that is a story, like Freddie Mercury's, it needs to be told. And to whomever gets the rights to make this biopic, which I can see it being Sony. I mean, why not? I mean, there's been good and bad history with them, so it's only appropriate that a biopic of George be told with all the good stuff that happened with Sony as well as the bad stuff, because that's just being historically accurate. There's only one name, and this is just my honest opinion, there is only one name that should be playing George, and that is Andrew Garfield. Not just because I'm a huge Spider-Man fan and I still think he was cut. I think it was unfair of Sony to fire him, but then again, he did go talking smack about Amazing 2, even though he was right. Because Amazing 2 was garbage. Him and Emma Stone were the only good things about that movie, but the movie was trash. It makes Spider-Man 3 like a cinematic masterpiece. And yes, I will go wash my mouth out with soap after this. And I could just hear that win. F that movie. F that movie. I'm with you on that, sweetheart. I'm on with that. But yeah, Andrew, to me, is the only one that can do a role like that justice. And if you look at some pictures of him, particularly when he's got like the overgrown mullet hair in the first Amazing Spider-Man, he looks like a young George Michael. So, you know, whoever is watching this that happen to be good Photoshop artists, do a Photoshop of Andrew Garfield as George Michael from Wham! To Faith, to Older, to Patience. See what you can do. But as to who would write it, you got to get Andrew Ridgeley heavily involved because he knew George the most from his teenage years to his early 20s and what have you, and just get various people involved that knew the man best. Because, you know, you could look at everything that he did in the public eye, but we got to remember, and I know this is not true for every single person, but for some, there's the public face, and then there's the private face, you know. Be able to tell it from all angles. That's just my thoughts. That, and I suppose it's just this image now of Andrew Garfield with whoever they get to act with someone playing Andrew Ridgeley. It's just this image of them now either doing Wham Rap or Wake Me Up Before You Go. It's like, that'll be interesting. But yeah, long tangent. I hope that happens. As you know, to finish off with Bohemian Rhapsody, it's a solid movie. Yeah, again, there are some inaccuracies, but the general payoff and end result, I recommend this to anybody who is a Queen fan and to people who just love biopics, or if you just love to see a good story, well told, by a good solid cast of actors, just to do a legendary performer honor and justice. I can't say it any more than that.